Hey there, this is Zachary.
And I'm Jay,
the hosts of Fear and There.
Thanks so much for listening to the following podcast on Public House Media.
Disarming Disability.
Hello, and welcome to Disarming Disability Podcast. I am Sarah Tuberty.
And my name is Nicole Kelly, and we are so excited for you to join us in this wrap-up episode. If you have missed it, the past 3 episodes have all been about sexuality. And yes, that means literal sex, but also the idea of intimacy and closeness, and what that means from some different perspectives, from some different really, really cool experts who have looked at or worked in disability and sexuality for a really long time.
Fantastic. All fantastic episodes, all fantastic perspectives, and really helped us along this journey of really sort of deciphering what sexuality is and why it is particularly important for people with disabilities. Right now, I think there's sort of not right now, but I think we have a very long history of people with disabilities being considered asexual, in that they just don't engage in any type of sexual interactions and sexuality and intimacy interactions. And like you were saying, Nikki, like that could be actual sex, or that could be holding somebody's hand or arm or being able to touch and cuddle. Those are all forms of sexuality and intimacy. And I think it's over and over and over again, there's this perception that people with disabilities don't want to engage in those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I feel like a lot of it ties back to, of course, what's reflected in, my brain goes right to media type spaces, which I know we kind of talk about a lot here, but I feel like what the media is reflecting is what they kind of think about different certain groups. And I think in this particular realm, it's literally not thought of at all, right? So we are not seeing people with disabilities in any kind of, I'll call it promiscuous, I'll use that word, but any kind of owning your sexuality and being proud of your sexuality, because it's almost looked down on. There's still this stigma that we're fighting against. So even if, a body like mine is to show up in sort of Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, probably the assumption of that reaction is that it's going to be, oh, that poor girl, good for her for putting on a swimsuit and posing, right? Let's be honest, I got waves of that from doing This America stuff. So it's weird because it's almost like we haven't been put in those positions because of the societal stigma. I feel like I said all that in a really, really weird, convoluted way. So I hope you understood what I was trying to say.
No, totally. When I think that it's just this is thinking and trying to process everything.
Yeah.
When you're saying that, just being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, or when I was competing for the Maxim cover challenge, that's why it was important to me to be there. And of course, I even felt my own thing about being why would you want to be on the cover of something that is so sexualized like that? You want to work with children. How does this impact your ability to work with kids and whatever? But over and over again, it's no, this message of people with different bodies being seen as beautiful and having that be the norm versus some different sub-fetish type space, because I do feel our bodies are sexualized in a fetish-y type way, and that's real. I suppose whether we were talking about that or not, but there's groups and they're individuals who I'm not sure the right way to sort of categorize that.
They're called devotees.
They're called devotees, right? Yes. And so they have sexual fetishes on people, particularly with amputations, right?
Sorry. I guess we're talking about our own world in that instance, but it applies.
It does. And just because it's with amputations doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in other groups as well. I can't imagine that there aren't sort of subcultures of fetishy type spaces. They're also in, fetishizing, what is the right word? Whatever.
Fetishizing. I think you're right.
Turning just various forms of disabled bodies into sexual fetishes, right? So,
and I think what's so, so deeply sad about that is the fact that, again, that's any kind of chance that we're having to try to express our sexuality right now, the way that it's being caught or the attention it's kind of receiving lots of times really is from those fetish spaces. And that obviously is something that is kind of a black hole of nastiness. And so again, that's just another layer put on top of us of, oh, well, we can't be sexualized or do anything sexual, because if we are, you know, being proud of our sexuality, the messages I receive into my Instagram account immediately are from people fetishizing. What's the word again? Fetishizing me. Fetishizing.
Yeah.
So that feels really evil and dark and not good. And so it's just another layer, another barrier for us to jump through and kind of process and work through before we can be proud of who we are and what we bring to the table.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And I feel that we as a society in general really struggle with talking about sexuality and intimacy, and we as a society meaning sort of this like Western, like Christian-y, American-y world.
We're so waspy, yeah.
And just like don't talk about sexuality in general, and sort of, and I feel like sexuality, I think it's assumed this like X-rated thing, and that's all that sexuality is, so therefore we can't talk about it. But I feel like sexuality, just as I'm learning, and I feel like this is sort of a fun thing that I'm learning, is like every single thing is a spectrum. So I feel like there's such a spectrum to sexuality, and I just feel like not having access to information, not having access to like correct information, it really harms us as a whole. So then if we add disability on top of that, like, or I suppose if we come back that like if sexual education and like intimacy and relationships is being taught anywhere, it absolutely doesn't have the disability chapter. So we're like further removed from that, or the disability section of the disability topic is just so much further removed, even if sexuality is brought up in any type of learning space. And I share this in that, like, I'm so fortunate for growing up in Northern California that even in I went to private school in Northern California, and even in my like private religious school, like every spring we had family life, and it was these workbooks, and I was pulling them out through my parents' house last week, or when I was there a couple months ago, and just like the level of just information that's in these, and we talked a lot about just all of the different things related to sexuality and intimacy and like, you know, closeness and partnerships and relationships, and sort of like, it just was so amazing. And I'm just so thankful that I had that every year from third grade to like 17, that all of these things are so normal for me, or my baseline, that I didn't realize that other people didn't have like this well-rounded of a sexual health curriculum.
No, in the middle of public school, Iowa, mine was, we were supposed to get the sex talk in the 5th grade. And it was a big deal. Like you waited for that day all year long, and like nobody had talked to me about sex, but like you knew it was coming in the 5th grade. It was known. And then I was so disappointed because all we talked about instead was puberty and how to shave your legs. And while that's very important to talk about, don't get me wrong, I wasn't actually told how to have sex. So I literally learned how to have sex from another classmate after our teacher walked out of the room. And I was like, wait, nobody told me how you have sex. And then in middle school health class, we had just some pretty obnoxious, we giggle as we talk about the anatomy of your body, and then we move on. So I actually am somebody who was never in a space with adults where they were actually talking to me about sexuality in a normal way, or in a way that also was kind of tying it to this idea of identity and also intimacy, and the fact that it is all kind of well-rounded together. I assume that sounds like you had we are a spectrum. I probably am on the opposite other end of what yours was then. A big part of kind of my spring awakening and kind of walking into my adulthood and my relationship with my body, and as it related to like partners that I wanted to have and boys that I wanted to date. For me, it was really hard because, and you're my age, so you probably felt this too, dating apps were just becoming super duper normal when I was in college. It went from being like you creepily find people on the internet to like, no, a lot of us aren't on this, and it's like it's actually a place where you can find people who aren't creepy to go on dates with. And so a lot of my friends in college were, you know, on all of these different dating apps and trying to meet people. You know, I went to a huge, big university, so there were 40,000 people just on campus, you know, lots of people to meet. And I remember that was the last thing that I wanted in the whole entire history of the universe. And as I was talking about that with some of my best, closest friends, they were like, well, why wouldn't you want to be on there? Like, why not? Like, we know that maybe you want to go on dates, you want to start to meet people. And I realized it literally was because I could not put pictures of my body up onto an app where that's all people had to go on. Like, if I am in a space where you're judging me purely by the fact that I have an appearance that also includes having one hand, I know I will be looked past every single time, and I could not subject myself to that space and to that like known rejection. I knew that it was going to be known rejection. So I'm just curious if I was alone in that feeling, or were you kind of in the middle of dating apps? Have you tried dating apps? Or what has it been like if you have? Because I never have. I've always dated people that I've met.
Agreed. And I really love that you brought this up. Similarly, I have never I've never downloaded a dating app. I've never completed any type of profile for anything. Lots of my friends have, for exactly the same things that you have shared. And sort of that, like, do I want to put myself, like, do I put pictures of my hand up there? Do I not put pictures of my hand up there? I was sitting on the dump seat with another flight attendant, and she was talking about how she went on a date with this, like, really cute guy. You know, she was like really excited for the date, and then he shows up and didn't have any teeth. And she's like, what? Like, she was flipping out at the fact that this man didn't have any teeth and was throwing a tantrum. She's like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Like, he went out, like, so she clearly did not continue going on a date with him. And then she's like, and I went and looked at all of his pictures, and he's smiling in all of his pictures, but isn't showing any of his teeth. So she just was like, oh my God, I can't believe that this person would show up like this and cheat me. So then I was like, oh my God, like, if I were to put myself there, I would be the girl that showed up and didn't have fingers if I didn't put that in the pictures. Yes. And then even if I did put myself on the pictures, I think in my head, if I had opened up a dating app and then put pictures of myself on there, and then people were like, hey, what's your name? I was like, oh, get out of here. Like, there's no reason why you would actually want to date me after seeing my hand. Like, you are not real. I don't want to date you. So I feel like there's lots of layers of internalized ableism and shame, right? So I viewed myself as somebody that was undateable. So then I proceeded to not put myself in situations like that, because why would someone want to date me? So I feel all the people that I've dated have been people that I've met and that I had like some type of, but even meeting them, like, I assume that nobody wants to date me. I assume that people are just talking to me, be nice. Like, it takes a long time for me to get over that, which is real. This is a very real part of having a disability, I think, and thinking that I'm worthy enough to have real partnerships, and that we had to, like, get over that hump by meeting in person several times before I felt comfortable enough to invite them into my spaces.
And interestingly, so I do have a good friend who has one hand who met her husband on a dating app, but similar to us, I know that the profile that she set up was intentionally showing her arm, but she had done some really cool photo shoots for some really cool kind of brands. And so she was able to kind of use these model shots as a way to say, like, no, I've been able to, like, use this difference in who I am to do some really cool things, and here are, like, the beautiful ways that I've done this, which I think is really clever, but also I think that shows also, too, like, it's unfair that we should have to show those professional shots on a profile where other people aren't having to show their professional shots, right? Like, that's not fair either. And I mean, her husband is amazing and they're so happy. And so like the greatest thing ever. But like it just has never been of interest to me because I just understand the stigma that we're up against. Kind of a step away from that, but one that I feel like is still in this stigma world. When I meet people who don't know me, who have babies, that's weird because I know you're not like randomly walking into a space where you're like, hello, mother with a baby. But like, for example, I went with, this was a long time ago now, but like when I first started dating Nate, we ended up in a situation where we were with adult people and one of the couples had a baby. And so everybody, of course, was passing the baby around. Obviously, this was also pre-COVID. And when it came my turn to hold the baby, suddenly the mom was like right by my side and kept right away, wanted to take the baby away from me and very clearly wasn't comfortable with her child being in my care because she thought I was going to drop her baby. I mean, that's what it came down to. And that's not the first time that has happened to me. And I feel like with our experts, we have a little bit of that start of layered conversation where society looks at you and thinks, how are you ever going to take care of a child? And that, because I haven't had one yet, I haven't encountered doctors really being like, now, are you sure? How are you going to do this? But I have encountered the mothers like that. And that tells me the messages I'm receiving in that moment is, oh, the people around me don't think that I am fit to even hold a baby, let alone take care of one. Have you ever been in situations like that?
I hear you. I hear you so many 1,000%. And yeah, that is real. And feeling that stigma. I don't think I have enough people in my life who have babies. So I don't know that I've had like that specific example. But it's so accurate in feeling that those are absolutely the messages that are being had. And then I almost think to myself, like, how could I have a kid? Like, I do so much of my life one-handed. How can I lose my one hand if I'm holding a kid with that hand? Then how do I interact with the world? Or one arm or one body part or like, so again, I know there's several of our friends and people that we know that have lived differences have kids and I love watching their videos and all those things, which are great. But again, yeah, that is the baseline message is that we're sort of like unfit for living, let alone having children. Which I think if we want to go into deep dive into that a little bit further, I think it's important to touch back on eugenics and how we as the Euro-Western society, maybe those aren't the right words, but we as sort of this Western society in the United States have a long history of forced sterilization, and that is called eugenics. So eugenics is a practice of forced sterilizing people because we've deemed them as being unfit to reproduce. And there was a big case, the Carrie Buck versus Bell case where it was three families or three generations had children with at the term I think it was feeble-minded, but they were children with developmental delays. And then the state was saying, Virginia maybe, was saying that they were unfit to be parents, so they were trying to force sterilize the daughter to no longer have children anymore because they're like 3 generations of people with intellectual disabilities is enough and we don't need to have any more. Yeah, and just this idea that we have to force people to not reproduce because we don't think that they're fit for society or the needs that they need in order to be, effective parents or in order, like the things that they need in order to be parents are not acceptable needs. And I feel like all parents need things in order to be parents. No one parent is taking care of children completely by themselves, right? We're all massively interdependent with our parents who are raising kids. And I just feel like the needs that individuals who have a variety of different disabilities those needs are like, not okay. You're not allowed to have those needs. And because you have this different set of needs than what normal society has, then like you're not allowed to be parents because we don't want to have to, quote unquote normal, because we don't want to have to change the way that we think or care for or provide resources in order to be able to support those needs, right? So, and it just makes me think of the story that Amanda was telling us, and that what first got her really interested in sexuality to begin with when she was on her clinical placement. And the woman that she was working with was put on birth control and didn't know what that was. So that's a form of sterilization, right? Like, it wasn't going in and like medically altering her anatomy, but it still was putting her in a space where she could not reproduce. And whether or not that was like that part, still, like, those are other people that have made that decision for her without communicating to her whether or not that was a decision that she wanted to make on her own.
Yep, totally. Yes, absolutely. And this stigma that we're talking about, again, you know, between our awesome three experts, I feel like we talked about it with all of them, this idea of stigma, this idea of parenting, this idea of this different set of needs being to the world feeling so outlandish because of the stigma that it's just not even comprehensible, you know, almost is the feeling. I'm putting a word in people's mouths there, but it really kind of across the board, even though we were talking about different things with all three of these people, I feel like those are the things that really shine through in the conversation, as well as really for me that what we started with, the idea that, you know, disabled bodies are just not sexual and they can't be sexual. And what a travesty that is. We should fix that.
We should.
The other piece that I think is important to touch on is, again, this idea of intimacy, and that people, just everybody, blanket statement, people, they need touch and they need closeness, and that closeness, yes, can be in the form of sex, but also is so much more than sex. And I feel like we talked about that gap that exists in intimacy also with all three of them. And I just want to highlight the importance of that feeling of closeness, whether it be just with touch or cuddle or good conversation or, you know, baking an awesome cake and eating it together. Food can be sex. You know, that's so important. And it is something that I think people are, again, the stigma, are almost scared to touch a disabled body, and that sucks. It sucks.
It does suck. And it makes me think of and maybe you experienced this too, but I remember in high school, I went to a freshman orientation, and they had us standing in two concentric circles. So there's people on the inside and people on the outside. And then they wanted us to turn our shoulders so that then we were sort of like shoulder to shoulder of the person on the inside circle. I was on the outside circle. And then we were facing each other. So the idea was that we would just march along in our circles, and then, you know, we would high five everybody in the other circle. And of course, it's on my left side. It could have been on my right side if it was on my left side. And this like over, and I'm beginning high school, and this is my first day at this new school. And how over and over and over again, just everybody seeing my hand, not wanting to touch my hand, seeing that this was me. Like, and it was so hot. I didn't have a sweatshirt to hide in, and it was just so exposed. In that space, people would skip my hand. They would clasp my forearm, like they wouldn't even touch my actual hand. So those are messages at 13 that is telling me that the world wants nothing to do with my hand. So why would somebody who, like, I am opening up the deepest, scariest parts of my life to, like, right, intimate relationships are that, whether they're really close friends or somebody that you're having, like, you know, a partnership in that sort of, that adds in the layer of I don't know, whatever, but someone you're like in a relationship with and close friends, like, why open up myself so much more to these spaces when already the world wants nothing to do with me, right? So those are things I had to sort out as I entered adulthood, and that, like, I received the messages that my body is gross, like, over and over again, which is just so sad. And
I have never heard that story before, Sarah. That breaks my heart. That is such a, like, that is the worst possible in the history of the universe time for that to have happened. Like, first day of high school. my heart breaks for you in that, like, I'm sure it felt like it was like 3 hours long that you did that, and it probably was only like 15 minutes, but like, oh my gosh.
I went to the bathroom, I cried, and I did not return to freshman orientation. Like, I hid somewhere until the day was over, and then my mom came to pick me up. So yeah, it was
my
fun.
gosh, baby Sarah, I just want to scoop you up and give you the biggest hug in the history of the universe. Of course we can't be sexual. Like, right? Literally, these are, so mine isn't directly related to entering high school, but parallel experience for me, of course, because of course, we in my hometown, every April, we had a Civil War reenactment. Like, for real, like you see in Sweet Home Alabama, we had a reenactment, and it actually was really cool.
Side note,
like,
did you know that my dad and I do that, or like we were reenactors? Okay, cool.
We have talked about this, which is another reason why we're friends. But yeah, it was like a huge part of my hometown culture, and so many people in my hometown would do reenacting on that weekend, and it was like such a big deal. And I knew I still probably know like way too many facts about the Civil War, and I'm like obsessed with Gone with the Wind, even though, you know, it's also awful historically, but like, like all of those things, because that was a part of my culture growing up. Okay, that was way too much information. On to the actual part that you need to know. So in the high school gym, so Actually, it was happening in probably the same space that yours was happening, but I was a little younger. We would have every year a Civil War ball, which was the most fun because you were learning like how to do the Virginia Reel and all these really, really fun, cool dances from back in the 1860s. And they had an old school band on stage, and everybody dressed up in beautiful hoop skirts like you see in Gone with the Wind for real. And it was the best night. It was the best night. But as I started to get older, and I can't even tell you exactly what age it was, I suddenly, I remember the year, but like I suddenly realized that I didn't want to do the partner dances, where there's a lot of dances in those times where you like pass between people and you change partners a lot. And I suddenly stopped. And all of my friends were like, what are you doing, Nikki? Like, you love this dance. We know that you love this dance. And it was because I was at that age where suddenly I was like, I don't want to deal with people's reactions. I don't want to deal with every single new stranger grabbing for my left hand and instead going, oh, and having like a bad reaction to the fact that I was there with one hand, or awkwardly not knowing what to do. And again, that's like my parallel. I'm sure that was when I was entering kind of that middle school space that happened. But I remember very distinctly my friends being like, but you love this dance. And me having to be like, I'm not doing it. I won't do it.
Yeah, which is so real. And similarly, anytime dancing, like I can't tell you the number of times that I've been dancing and that like people would want to hold my hand and they're like looking for my fingers. They think I'm just holding my hand in like a fist. So they'll like take their fingers looking for my fingers, and then they will look at my hand, and the amount of like shock, drop, and release that happens, and then they're totally freaked out, they're totally uncomfortable, and then they leave. Like the amount of times that's happened is like so uncomfortable, to the point where like I will hide my hand. Like people will try to reach for my hand, and I'll be like, you don't want my left hand. I know it. I know that you don't want my left hand. You will only touch my right hand. And it's fun, and it's cool. There's this I do feel the need to share the story. And I was at where was it? I was at a bar in Budapest a couple years ago. I took my sister to Budapest, which was so fun. And we were at this cool bar. There was like games and drinks in one area. And then there was like a little dance room where they had on, you know, like Latino music. There was also like salsa-y things. So there was this guy who I met who's very cute, and we had been talking, and he spoke German. So we're trying to like translate with each other because he spoke English, but like not super great. I can say I have a sister and 1, 2, 3, 5 in German. That's the extent of my German. And so we sort of were talking and trying to figure each other what we're saying with the loudness of everything that was happening. And we didn't talk about my hand, but there was an opportunity for him to like see me. I was wearing a tank top. And then I found him, like, later my sister and I did stuff, whatever. And then I found him again in the salsa room. And, like, yeah, I like, you know, all that type of dancing, which is fun. And he just reached for my hand. And it sounds like such a silly thing, but he just reached for my hand, like that he had seen it, he had acknowledged it, and he still wanted to hold on to it. So he reached for both of my hands as if it was not a problem in the world. And then we just danced. And it was like the most beautiful, most magical thing that happened when I was 27 years old. Never.
I was just about to say, the fact that you remember it so vividly says everything. It is beautiful. It absolutely is beautiful. But the fact that was the odd experience, that to you was the odd experience of just the acceptance and the beauty of you having a different and total acceptance from a stranger. We don't feel that. We never feel total acceptance from strangers, and it's effed us up, man.
Amen. So, yeah, I mean, I think I was 28, 29, when I had that, and just that was the first experience that had happened. I'd gone almost 30 years of my life, and that had never happened. And that happened one time, is powerful. So, yes. So let's talk about sex. Let's talk about disability people being sexual beings. And let's talk about people with disabilities seeing themselves as sexual beings, because there's a lot of nonsense we have to get through in order to even do that. And I didn't start dating anybody, like for real dating anybody, until I was like 19 was my first like official, whatever, like serious boyfriend, because I struggled so hard having friends in high school. I was like, there's no reason anybody would want to date me. Why would they want to date me? Like, I'm the like clearance item girl. Like, you could have any girl in the world. Like, why on earth would you want to talk to me? Like, what do I have anything else to give?
1,000,000% same. A big portion of it is I also grew up in purity culture, so I don't know which to blame more, to be honest, whether it was purity culture or whether it was a disability. The honest truth is that it's a huge mix of both. And I would like to think I've done my homework on both to understand and deconstruct now kind of what those ideologies were and why they did not work, either one of them, when it came to dating as a young person, and what I wish people would have talked to me about instead. But absolutely. Like, I notoriously all through high school and into college would not touch boys, would not be around them, would not be alone with them. And it had nothing to do with the fact that I didn't like them or I didn't want to hang out with them or be special to them. It had everything to do with the fact that I did not know how to be confident or ask for the acceptance and respect that I really needed in those spaces. So to the cute boys in high school and college who were kind to me that I never dated or kissed, still appreciate you. You were important. Yeah. And I also want to address that I know that we are we are in our 30s, we are white women, we are also straight women. And I feel like that's a really important thing to acknowledge, that then if you have disability, then if you have sexuality, and then there's a sort of baseline air quotes expectation. And I just want to say that I recognize that both you and I fit the baseline expectation in that we are both straight, and acknowledge that there's a lot of our friends and a lot of people with disabilities who do identify as parts of the LGBT communities, as different, in expressing themselves in different ways. And like, absolutely, those add so much more layers. What you're saying is that those are huge. Every time you add a layer in sexual identity and sexual preference, that is another identity that is oppressed right now. And that just adds a whole other layer of, you're exactly right. Like, we are talking about it from our privileged standpoint. And yes, I think it's important that we acknowledge that, and also say to the people who are listening who maybe have some sort of different sexual preference or different identity, in future seasons, hopefully maybe season 3, we can throw in a lot more intersectionality episodes, just because we are acknowledging, of course, who we are as people. And if we can pull in these experts from other areas and really focus in on these other intersectionalities, we would love to do that. So know that is something that's been talked about, and is something that hopefully we will bring to you very soon.
Yes, agreed.
So I think we probably should wind ourselves down here.
Yeah.
But we certainly hope that you enjoyed the 3 experts that we were able to bring to you for this chapter. We really respected speaking with them, and we really respected the knowledge that they had and the work that they do, and hopefully you felt the same. And stick with us. You guys, we only have one more episode left in this season. Can you believe it? So stay with us, because our next episode, it'll be our final season 2 wrap up. And what you're going to hear about is kind of what our journey through this season looked and felt like, and maybe some of the things that we are dreaming about in the future, because in case you haven't picked up on it, Sarah and I are big dreamers, and we have a lot of plans, a lot of big plans. And so we would love for you to join us and listen in and get some ideas on what's coming next. We'll see you. Bye. 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 Bye.
Thank you for spending part of your day with us. We want to give thanks to our network, Public House Media, for our intro beats to Jason Bartz with Cybernetics. Our logo art, we want to remember Patrice. You can find his work at normalpersons.com.
Be sure to follow Disarming Disability on Facebook and Instagram. And lastly, be sure to check out our website, disarmingdisability.com, where you can find all 13 episodes of Season 1, links to resources, transcriptions, and discussion questions for each episode. And check out our blog where we feature amazing disability advocates. See you next week.
Bye!